Please, do that subscribe, click like. Here's the deal. Today we're going on just a little RV adventure. It's not going to be a real long one. It's going to be going to a Texas state park. We really like Texas state parks. We're headed to Lake Mineral Wells State Park. It's a beautiful state park, but that's only half the story. It's in an incredibly historical area. All right, we're headed towards downtown Weatherford, Texas. Now, why do I bother mentioning this at all? Well, there's two kind of historical points about Weatherford, Texas. There's a bunch, actually, but there's two I'm going to bring up today. If you are a fan of Lonesome Dove, then you know the story of Charlie Goodnight and Oliver Loving, which that is really just a retelling of their real story. And when Charlie Goodnight, and I'm going to use the real people, had to bring his partner, Oliver Loving, back to Texas and bury him, this is where they buried him, here in Weatherford, Texas. It was kind of the center of the universe for a little while. The other thing is, we're driving right through downtown Weatherford in a couple of minutes on a piece of old highway. I got to back up just a little bit. Around the turn of the century, and by that I mean, from the 1800s to the 1900s, around 1910, 1915, the automobile was coming into widespread use, was getting popular. But the roads that we had then were all made for horse and buggies, and whenever it rained or anything like that, they were impassable to automobiles. Well, a congressman in Washington decided, a very far-sighted, really out there kind of guy, thinking what we need is a transcontinental highway. This is long before the interstate system, even long before Route 66, which they say is the mother road, was the first transcontinental highway. Well, kinda, yeah. Well, this congressman, that last name of Bankhead, and I can never remember his first name, but Congressman Bankhead decided that we could make this transcontinental highway, and the federal government wouldn't have to pay for most of it. And what he did was he wanted to attach towns to towns, connect towns to towns, and by bringing this road through a town, the towns realized it would bring, business, commerce, and prosperity to that town. And so towns were really fighting for the chance to be on this transcontinental highway. And they would say, well, if you'll bring it here, then we'll make all the area through our town a nice paved road. And there wasn't really concrete paving at the time. They had to do it with brick. And so a lot of towns across the United States along the line of this road, this highway, actually had brick downtown main streets because they wanted the Bankhead Highway to go through their town. Now we're coming up on basically the town square here in Weatherford in just a second. It's got a beautiful, prairie architecture courthouse, what many of the counties in Texas has. A really nice one, and it's a square. We go around it, and when we go around this courthouse and drive on this little stretch right here, we're driving on what was a piece of the Bankhead Highway. How cool is that? All right, here we are at the National Vietnam War Museum. This is the national museum for that era. Why on earth is it here in Mineral Wells, Texas, in the middle of nowhere, right in the middle of the Cross Timbers Forest of Texas, across the street from a state park, which is pretty nice? Why is it here? Why is it in this very spot? Well, first off, this is about the era. It's about the impact that war had on people and cultures all over the world. It's not just about a war. It's about everything to do with it. The people that were there from many, many countries. It's not about the United States. It's about that era. We're going to look at it real quick, and maybe you'll get a chance to visit it someday.
The National Vietnam War Museum is located less than a mile and across the street from what was Fort Walters, Texas. This fort was the initial training base for virtually every Army helicopter pilot who served in Vietnam. 40,000 helicopter pilots were trained from 1956 through 1974, with flying hours exceeding 5.6 million total hours. From 500 to 550 helicopters were in the air at any given time, and there were, on average, 2,000 takeoffs and landings daily, Monday through Friday, making Fort Walters one of the world's busiest airports. The post had 25 remote training locations called stage fields on farms and ranches scattered all over thousands of square miles of North Texas. Most of the fields were named after actual Vietnam locations in order to prepare the students for serving there. Some of these fields were hundreds of miles away and oriented on the map to have the same relationship to each other as the real places.
Everybody asks, why on earth is the National Vietnam War Museum is here in Mineral Wells, Texas? Well, no other place probably on the planet would be more appropriate to that, because right across the street you have Fort Walters. Now, Fort Walters was, that's W-O-L, Walters was a historical post in its own right in World War II and even before that. But for Vietnam is where they trained every single helicopter pilot that went to Vietnam. This is where they came, this is where they learned how to fly a helicopter to start with. Then they went off somewhere and learned how to fly Hueys and Cobras and things like that. 500 aircraft, guys would get in these aircraft and they would go off in the morning and come back at lunchtime. And then other guys would get into that aircraft after lunch, while the first guys went to more classroom stuff, things like that. And then those guys would take off and fly and do exercises. And then they would come back, and after dinner, they would take off again, and they would do night operations. Okay? So that meant they had to have an army of people with vehicles to refuel these things, you know, at lunch and dinner time and stuff like that. They had an unbelievable amount of people here. They trained 40,000 U.S. Army helicopter pilots in about 18 to 20 years here at Fort Walters to go to Vietnam, which became known as the Helicopter War. There's no better place to have the Vietnam War Museum than right here. And they trained in these little things that were nearly impossible to fly. So think about that. Okay, we're not going to go over every exhibit here at the National Vietnam War Museum. To give you an idea of the kind of stuff that are things that are covered here. For example, here's a display about the Montagnard. Now I was just talking to some people here and they said, the who? The Montagnard are the indigenous people of Vietnam. They don't share the lineage, the heritage of the Chinese. The Vietnamese people are descended from the Chinese. These people are not. And as you might imagine, they didn't appreciate the Chinese and the Vietnamese taking over their land. So as a consequence, these indigenous people of Vietnam fought with Americans very often, especially the Special Forces. This is some displays of some of their weapons and some of their stuff. This is the kind of thing that you don't hear about that you're going to see here at the National Vietnam War Museum.